My name is Jeremy Ross, and I'm the Soybean Extension Agronomist for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture, and I'll be giving a recap of the 2020 Arkansas soybean growing season. Just like in other states, 2020 in Arkansas was a unique year. The COVID-19 pandemic made us change many of our typical educational delivery methods, such as field days, grower meetings, scout schools, and other face-to-face meetings. And many of these activities were switched to virtual platforms, similar to the 2021 Tri-State Soybean Forum that you are watching now. However, the pandemic did not stop our soybean producers from producing a very good crop. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes discussing some of the significant events of the 2020 soybean growing season. Typical of the last several years, Arkansas soybean producers experienced a slow start to the 2020 growing season due to wet and cool conditions early in the planting window. Even though we had a slow start, we were much improved compared to the 2019 planting progress. This graph shows the Arkansas planting acreage in blue bars, the harvested acres in red bars, and the average state soybean yield on the green line from 2011 to 2020. Acres are on the left-hand side of the graph, yield in bushels per acre on the right-hand side of the graph, and the years at the bottom of the graph. As shown in this graph, the planted soybean acres in Arkansas were well above 3 million acres from 2011 to 2018. Due to the extended period of rainy conditions and flooding issues across the state in 2019, Arkansas producers only planted 2.65 million acres of soybeans in 2019. This was the lowest planted acres since 1961. Early in 2020, I was expecting the soybean acres to rebound and hopefully reach that 3 million acre level. However, due to the low commodity prices and again some wet conditions early in the season, Arkansas soybean producers only planted 2.82 million acres in 2020. Early in the season, some of the other commodities grown by our producers showed better returns, and I think this was one of the reasons we didn't see more soybean acres in 2020. Despite the slow start and some other weather issues during the season, USDA still has the state average soybean yield at 50 bushels an acre for 2020. Other than some wet conditions early, Arkansas had moderate weather conditions for most of the growing season. We did experience some dry and hot conditions during July and August that I think potentially affected yield on a portion of the soybean crop that was in the early reproductive stages. Probably the most notable weather events in Arkansas in 2020 were Hurricane Laura and Tropical Storm Beta. Hurricane Laura affected Arkansas in late August and Tropical Storm Beta in mid-September. Laura did cause some damage to the soybeans and other commodity crops, but not as bad as we anticipated. The day after Hurricane Laura moved out of the state, me and the other state commodity agronomists divided up the state to assess the impact of the storm. I traveled from central Arkansas to northeast Arkansas, and the top two pictures represent some of the most severe damage I saw that day to soybeans. I was very surprised at what little damage I saw during my outing. Overall, most of the soybean crop was either standing up straight or with a slight lean. There were isolated areas where taller soybean plants had a severe lean or lodged flat. Reports from southern part of the state indicated more lodging, but overall not as bad as we expected. Some of the other commodities took damage as well. One area near Colt, Arkansas had corn that was completely flat, as shown by the bottom two photos. But again, this was an isolated area and most of the other commodities fared better than we expected. I did receive several reports from producers during harvest that their soybean yields just seemed off. We're still investigating what could have happened to these fields, but some of the loss could be associated with the heavy rainfall and the wind associated with Hurricane Laura. Tropical Storm Beta did not have the wind that was associated with Hurricane Laura, but Beta did produce several inches of rainfall that delayed harvest in our early planted fields. I did receive some reports of damaged grain, but not as much as we've seen in years past. As for pest and disease issues, I would consider 2020 a typical year. Arkansas is still dealing with herbicide-resistant weed issues and will be dealing with these problematic weeds for the foreseeable future. Nematodes in soybeans are continuing to be a bigger issue each year, and we desperately need resistance into newer varieties coming to the market in the future. Foliar diseases really didn't show up until later in the season with the wet weather from Hurricane Laura and Tropical Storm Beta, but most of the soybean crop was in late reproductive stages and fungicide applications were not economically needed. We did have a few fields treated for red-banded stink bugs in the southern part of the state, and corn earworm continues to be our biggest issue on the insect side. The biggest surprise and most noteworthy was the soybean price increase during the season. Compared to the price at planting, soybeans gained between $1 to $2.50 by the end of the season. If we could have had these higher prices last winter, I believe we would have had more soybeans planted during 2020. Hopefully this trend will continue and soybean producers can take advantage of this market. 2020 will be a year to remember in many ways. Hopefully 2021 will be much better. If you should have any questions, please contact me either by email or cell phone. Thank you for watching and have a safe and productive 2021.